Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for Understanding Clinical Trials and What It Means for You with Simonnette Lucas, Director of Office of Research Integrity at Miami Cancer Institute. If you have any questions or comments, please use the chat function and we will address them during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. And following today's program, we will send a short survey and we ask that you please take a few minutes to provide us with your valuable feedback. So without further ado, please help me in welcoming Simi Lucas.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for taking the time out of your day to join. I hope this will be an informative session for you. And again, if you have questions, please put them in the chat and I will answer. At the end of this presentation, if we do have time, I am going to go over a search of clinicaltrials.gov. So a live search. So in the event you'd like to see something, you could put it in the chat as well. All right. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and start. So today we're doing understanding clinical trials and what it means for you, really speaking to how clinical trials can benefit us, right? So first slide, let's see, we move here. All right. So the areas we're going to cover today is what is a clinical trial? That's really important. The role of the IRB, exploring becoming a research participant, reviewing the informed consent form and understanding the consenting process, because it's not just a form, we'll go over that. What questions do I ask? And the questions could be prior to your participation, if you're going to participate, and during your participation. And then who do I utilize as my sounding board? Who do I ask for advice, whether I want to participate in a clinical trial? And then looking at clinicaltrials.gov, as I had said before, and we can do one live if we have the time. And then questions, right? So what is a clinical trial? A clinical trial or study. So I would like to preface with the National Cancer Institute updated their wording from trial to include studies, because we do have population science studies, which are trials, but they're considered studies. And so not just thinking of the medical portion, but thinking of population science. And so the wording has been updated in many areas to say clinical study versus clinical trial, but they're used interchangeably. So we're going to use them interchangeably today. So a clinical trial or study involves research using a human being, and they're also called participants, that is intended to add medical knowledge. So there are two main types. So there are the clinical trials that are interventional in nature, and then there's ones that are observational. And so clinical trials are research studies performed in people that are aimed to evaluating a medical, surgical, or behavioral intervention. They are primary way that researchers find out whether a treatment is viable. So whether the drug is beneficial, the device, the biologic is safe and effective. And then a clinical trial is used to learn if new treatment may be more effective than another. So that's why we come up with new drugs, because you may be taking drug A and it gives 3 side effects, and it may not target what we need it to target at that point, and it takes a longer time, whether treat, cure, or help in supportive care for someone, or minimize a side effect. And now we've studied drug Y, and drug Y turns out to be more beneficial to our patient population because it treats it in a shorter time span. So that is another reason for clinical trials or studies. So the next slide, we'll talk about the role of the IRB. And the role of the IRB, otherwise known as an ethics committee, The IRB is responsible for protecting the rights and welfare of human participants in research. And so many of us in the research world will say the IRB is responsible for subject safety or participant safety. And so that's making sure that any human being who is volunteering to participating in a clinical trial or clinical study, their rights and welfare, are protected. So, and this goes back to the Belmont report, which is respect for persons, beneficence, and justice. So in other words, do no harm. So in accordance with the FDA regulations, an IRB has the authority to approve, require modifications to secure approval, or disapprove research. The group review serves an important role in protecting of the rights and welfare of human research participants, as I had said. The purpose of the IRB is to assure that both advance in and by periodic review, the appropriate steps are taken to protect rights and welfare of humans participating in research. So there is an initial review where the research is approved, and now the investigator can start enrolling participants in the research. And then there's a continuation of that review to make sure that the rights and welfare of participants are being kept throughout the study. So there is, and then there's a final review to make sure that everything that needed to be done in the study has been done, and that the research will yield generalizable knowledge. All right, so exploring becoming a participant. So a research participant, as I had explained before, they're observational and interventional studies that folks can participate in, active participation. There's also ancillary and correlative studies where those studies are a part of another study and they've collected blood or tissue or another type of sample, say saliva, for lab research. These portions that I'm talking about are active participation in terms of observational studies. So an observational study is a researcher looking at people in normal settings. So you would volunteer to be in a focus group, and it is an observational study. Or you would be doing your normal day-to-day, and it could be an observational study. Or it could be that it's your standard of care and there is a portion of it which is an observational study. So for example, researchers may collect data through medical exams, tests, questionnaires about a group or older adults over time for more information to determine their lifestyle, cognitive health, etc. So that is an example of an observational study. Interventional studies are studies that are aimed at evaluating a medical, surgical, or behavioral intervention. And there are primary ways that researchers find out whether a treatment, a drug, vaccine, device, biologic, or behavioral intervention is safe and effective in people. So there are 4 types of interventional studies per the NCI, and those are treatment. And a treatment study is a study designed to evaluate one or more interventions for treating a disease, syndrome, or condition. And typically, in terms of cancer research, this is treatment of cancer. For supportive care, this is a protocol that's designed to evaluate one or more interventions where there's the primary intent to maximize comfort and minimize side effects or mitigate against a decline in a participant's health or function. So it is supportive in nature. And in terms of cancer research, a trial of supportive care would be, an example would be one where the patient has breast cancer and there are side effects related to the breast cancer that the treatment that's being given, and I say treatment, I shouldn't say treatment, but the care that's being given is supportive in nature. So sometimes there are supportive care interventions such as massages, acupuncture, anything to help with pain. Those are some of the examples. Or it could be a psychologist or a psychiatrist to help with what is happening with the patient. And then there is diagnostic, which is another interventional study, and that is to diagnose a disease, to help diagnose a disease. And in terms of cancer, it's diagnostic, a diagnostic, it could be a device or it could be a test in a lab that's aimed at diagnosing a particular cancer or markers that will show up that there is a particular cancer coming. And then there is prevention. So that's aimed at preventing the disease. It's an intervention that is, an example would be smoking cessation. So helping to prevent someone from smoking, which then would help prevent lung cancer. Or it could be something in terms of, we live in Miami, sunny. It could be SPF education. So folks utilizing SPF when they're out in the sun. So their normal interventions can happen and they're considered prevention, something that we could do every day. But it's just including that education for folks that would prevent cancer. So SPF preventing skin cancer. So in terms of reviewing an informed consent and the process, I wanted us to go through the informed consent document itself and what are some of the required language. And then there are other elements that are required, but only if applicable, and we won't go into that too much, just in the essence of time. But we'll talk about these areas that are required in any informed consent, in any study that you are participating in, and then we'll talk about the process itself. So in terms of the document, the consent needs to include the following basic elements per the regulations. And it is a statement that the study is research. This is not treatment, it is not standard of care, but it is research. An explanation of why this research is being done, so the purpose of the research. The expected duration of the participant's potential participation. So if I'm going to participate, how much of my time will this take for me to participate? In addition to my standard of care, if it is an interventional, if it's behavioral, it's in addition, and if it's outside of my standard of care treatment, how much time is this going to take for me to participate? So it should tell you the days that you need to come. If you need to physically be someplace, it should tell you about follow-ups. It should tell you the timing. If there are questionnaires involved, it should tell you, the timing of the questionnaires. How long will that take? So how long will the procedures take? How long is the duration of the participation? Whether it's if it's a day, that day, and your participation is done, if it's a few weeks, a few months, or a few years. And if there's follow-up included, then they should indicate also how long is this follow-up? Is the follow-up 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years? And depending on the study, follow-up could go for 10 years or more. And then a description of the procedures, which are experimental. So what is the actual research versus what is standard of care? So what's being done normally for my care, and then what is experimental in nature? And then the other thing that needs to be tackled in the informed consent is a description of the reasonable foreseeable risks and discomfort. So what are the risks participating? What are some of the risks that I may expect? Because it may not happen, but these are risks that are foreseeable, right? And the discomforts. A disclosure of appropriate alternative procedures or courses of treatment. So you may want to participate in this, and here is how it's advantageous, or you may want to do X because this is also advanced. So you have to be given alternatives to this research, right? And then the other thing is a statement describing the extent, if any, in which confidentiality or identification of identifying in records will be maintained. So how will my privacy be maintained? Are they going to record the data with my name, my social security number, my date of birth, etc.? Or will they code it, meaning they will put my participant ID on the information and then have a separate link that says participant 123 is equal to Simi Lucas. So that sort of information they need to tell. And then who will they be sharing the information with? That's important. Is there a sponsor that's providing funding, drug, or a device? And will my information be shared with the sponsor or funder? And how is that going to be shared? And if there are labs associated with the study, will my information be shared, my identifying information be shared with a lab, or will it be shared in a coded manner? As I said, now I have an identifier, which is 123, who is linked to Simi Lucas. Then the next thing is for research that it involves more than minimal risk, it should explain compensation in the event injury occurs. So they don't want injury to occur, but in the event a participant gets injured, what is their recourse? What should they do? What happens next? Who is going to pay? So all of that should be clearly specified in the informed consent form. An explanation on who to contact. So if I have an adverse reaction, an adverse event, I am feeling ill and I'm participating in a research study, or I have questions, general questions, because I forgot to ask something and now it came to my mind. Who do I contact while I'm participating in this research? And then whom do I contact for research-related injury? So that information needs to be there. And then a statement that the participation is voluntary. So at any point in time, a participant can decide, you know what? I don't wish to participate in this study anymore. This is it for me, you know, and it should say what will happen if a participant decides to discontinue his or her or they, the participation in the study. So without penalty, loss of benefits. And if so happens that if the study is being done at MCI and there is, or Baptist, and there is a participant who is an employee, then there would be language there to say, you know, withdrawing your participation from this research will not impact your employment or any treatment that you receive at Baptist or Miami Cancer Institute, or any of its entities. All right, so we're going into the process now. So there is a consent document, but consenting is not just reviewing a document and then, you know, the participant signing. So you'd be signing the consent form and then that's it. No, consenting is a process. So from the consent process happens from the time a study team member interacts with a patient or anyone who says, would you like to participate in this research study? So that's where the consenting process starts. And it ends once the person is done, like they are off the study completely. And during that time, there is that body where you're able to ask questions and there may be reconsenting. So the process starts with, would you like to participate in the research study, right? Providing, the next step is being provided the informed consent form and any other documents. So it may be a HIPAA authorization form. There are health information that it would be included in the research, and in any institutional specific forms. So at Baptist, there is the Bill of Rights that's institutionally specific. And so you would be given all of those forms to review at home with whomever you choose to, and then come back and make a determination on whether you'd like to participate. And the consenting process should happen in a quiet space, in a space that provides confidentiality. So maybe in a room separate and apart from where all other people are. And it should be quiet. So the participant has the ability to think about things and ask questions, because they may take it home and then not think of the questions at home, but while reviewing the consent with the person who's conducting the consent process, questions may arise. And it's okay to ask those questions and then, get those answers to determine whether you'd like to participate in the research study. Okay, so taking the informed consent home to discuss with family and friends or whomever you'd like to discuss it with, whoever's your sounding board, and we'll talk about that next. Having another discussion about concerns and questions with the investigator. If this is an interventional study, many cancer centers and institutions will have the investigator, so the treating doctor, do the consenting process. And then if it's an observational study, there may be a research nurse or a CRC, which is a clinical research coordinator, who would be doing the consenting process. Or it could be somebody who is trained and delegated, which is a part of the research process, to actually perform the consenting process. So this person they have to be approved by the IRB. So the IRB reviews and approves who is a part of the consenting process. The other thing is signing and dating the consent document. So that's a part. So think of the consent document as a contract. And so 2 people or 3 people, depending on the consenting process and depending whether a short form is used or it's the language of the person what the language of the consent is, the language of the language of the person who speaks, who's participating in the research. So that depends on whether it's 2 or 3 people who are participating in the signature portion, but think of it as a contract. And so the participant would sign the informed consent, and then the person who's conducting the consenting process would sign, and there may need to be a witness who signs. If there is a short form that's used, meaning there is not a consent form in the person's language, in the participant's language, and they're using the English consent as a long form, and then there is a short form that briefly describes what research is. And then the other portion is being provided a copy of the executed document. So as I said, think of it as a contract. So that contract should tell you everything you need to know about the research, that it is research, what are the risks, the benefits, as I had said, what is the term in terms of participating, how long, how will the information be used, how will privacy be protected, what are the costs, if there are any costs involved, is there compensation for injury if injury occurs, who do I contact? So all of that is within that document, and now you are being provided with a copy of the executed documents with all parties signed so that you can reference at any time. Okay, so that's the consenting process. Now, throughout the participation, and we're going to go into the questions here. So again, as I mentioned before, throughout your participation in a clinical trial or clinical study or research study, you have the opportunity to ask questions or to say, I no longer wish to participate. And so we're going to go into some questions on prior to participating, some of the questions that you should ask, and then while you're participating in a research study, some of the questions that you can ask. And there are other questions, but these are just an example of some of the questions. So how is this different to standard treatment? That's something that you can ask. How is this experimental drug or device different from the standard of care? Are there any risks that I should be concerned about? How will my personal information be protected in regards to a sample, if a sample is provided? And so that's why I say if applicable. Will my health insurance pay for the clinical trial? And will someone meet me to go over the cost of participating? Because there may be costs associated, and sometimes insurance does not pay. And you will need to have all of the information to make an informed decision on whether you'd like to participate in the clinical trial or do standard of care. Who can I contact if I have questions? Is there a number in addition to the general line? Because many informed consents, they provide a general line, but there is an additional number that you can call if you have specific questions, and that would be a direct link to your study team. How can I find out more information? Does this investigational drug, device, or biologic affect future fertility? So in the case of cancer treatment, this is something that many folks who, if it's prostate cancer, or if it's anywhere where you're being radiated in that region for man or woman, the question would be, or if a chemo is being given, the question would be, would this affect future fertility? And if yes, then there is a plan. There needs to be, here are your options in order, if you wish to have children in the future, here are your options to be able to do so. So that's a very important question to ask. Then the questions in terms of during the participation, who do I contact and what would happen if I receive an unexpected bill? So sometimes participants may receive an unexpected bill. That's something that can happen. But you need to know who to contact in the event that happens. It may not happen, but still need to know, in the event this happens, who do I contact? Can I withdraw? If yes, because some studies, at some portion, you may not be able to withdraw from the study, but at another portion you can. So you need to be able to know when I can and when I can't, and how to do so safely, right? And what happens to the data or the samples that have already been collected during the duration of your participation. And will the doctor be mad at me? Well, the answer to that is no. The doctor will not be mad, because you have the right to withdraw from your participation from any research study. What happens once my participation is complete, right? So what happens, do I need to do anything else once my participation is complete? And then another question could be, what if my disease returns? In cancer treatment, if you are enrolled in a clinical trial and your disease returns, that investigator needs to tell you what happens next. What do you do if it returns? Can I visit my primary care physician while participating in the study? And that's a valid question. Now, if I see I have a mole or something happens, do I go to my primary or do I come to my research physician? So those are questions that are very important during the participation of the study. And these are things that you can ask up front as well, if you think about it. And, things may change throughout. So another portion that we talked about was the consenting process. And during that process, there may be things that come up and there may be reconsenting that happens. So a consent may be updated to have updated risks, updated costs, updated duration, and those things, the study team will need to come back to the participant and say, here are the updates. Do you still wish to participate in this research study? And you as the participant will need to say, let me think about it. The costs, maybe the costs increase and you have to see, will your insurance cover it? Because this may be something that your insurance won't cover. And if your insurance won't cover it, will you be able to cover it? And if not, do you want to withdraw from the research? So informed consent, as I said, is a process. And so those new information will come up and that will be shared with you as a participant. and you will need to decide whether you wish to continue to participate. And then these questions may come up based on that. So it may be now the information is that there are new costs because the trial is extended and you have to participate for, instead of 5 days, 10 days. Now, who do I contact if I get an unexpected bill? This comes up. If it's a case where they say, you should, once you take this drug, and you are in complete remission after so and so this time, then you should be cancer free. Now, okay, but what happens if my cancer returns? So these are things that can come up during, and you may not think of them at the initial, but based on the new information you're provided, these questions arise, and you are free to answer the questions during your participation, okay? So the next thing is, who do I utilize as my sounding board? So we are aware that sometimes, especially in cancer care, sometimes folks don't want to burden their family with informing them, that they have cancer, and they want to utilize other folks as their sounding board. So again, it could be parents, it could be children, but there are also religious leaders, spiritual leaders, friends, other family members, a referring physician, a primary care physician, and a second opinion. And the second opinion there, I put an asterisk there because that's always important. I know sometimes, we see our physicians and we say, okay, they are the end all be all, they know it all. But it's also good for your peace of mind to get a second opinion in many cases, for you to feel comfortable. And it's okay if you go to a physician and this is for treatment trials or treatment studies, and you say, you know what, I don't feel comfortable with this person. I'm going to get a second opinion until I feel, or a third opinion maybe, until I feel comfortable. You have to feel comfortable with your treating physician. That is number one. You can't always be on, questioning what's happening. Are they taking care of me? Is this right for me? And you have the ability to ask those questions. Anything while participating in a study that doesn't sit right with you, you ask the question. Don't say, oh no, I'm afraid they may be mad at me. No, you have the right as a research participant to ask all the questions, and there are no dumb questions. All questions are important questions, and all questions are important to you for you to feel safe and feel protected while being in a research study, okay? Whether it may be a treatment trial or an observational trial. All the trials, you have to feel safe and feel like you are protected, okay? The other thing we'll talk about is Clinicaltrials.gov. And in cancer research, we tend to get folks who will go to Clinicaltrials.gov searching for a clinical trial that will fit whatever their needs are. So I wanted us to go over Clinicaltrials.gov and spend a little time. And if we have some, we can go into looking at the Clinicaltrials.gov in real time to see, how we can search and what is the advanced search. So Clinicaltrials.gov, I want to explain what that is. Firstly, it's a privately and publicly funded platform, database, if you say, that includes studies that are privately and publicly funded across the world. These are studies that are listed. The results are posted from the study. So yes, there is the initial posting, and it tells you when the study is open to accrual. So that means that you can participate in the clinical trial or the research study. And then it tells you if it's closed. Then it tells you what the results are in aggregate form. Of course, it's not going to tell you Susie Q participated and here are the results. It's going to give you the generalized information on the results of that particular trial. So the database for interventional studies, there are studies that have to be listed on there, and those are studies that are interventional in nature. And then you can also do voluntary listing. So an institution may say, you know what, even though this isn't mandated, by the FDA, I don't need to list my study on clinicaltrials.gov. I'm going to list it because I want it to be accessible and I want people to be able to search for that trial. And that also may help in the recruitment, right? So it may be something that's a voluntary study, so maybe acupuncture in helping minimize pain with a certain cancer, and it's not being offered anywhere else. And so folks will say, you know what, I want to get care at MCI, and it's being offered at MCI. And so folks will say, you know what, I want to get my care at MCI because I want to be able to participate in this acupuncture trial because I know acupuncture has worked for me in the past for just my routine, you know, taking care of myself. So that could be something. So, you know, folks also utilize this, even though it may not be mandated, but they utilize it for voluntary submission because it will help provide the study to people across the world because they can search and see what's open and available to them. So if you notice on this screen, and I'm going to use my little annotate here to show you, let me just quickly click my draw button here. Okay, so, oops. Hold on. Let me see if I could do this again. If this works. Okay, yellow. And let's see if it'll let me draw. Okay. For some reason, my annotate isn't working how I'd like it to work. Let's see if this will work here. Okay, just follow the mouse here because my annotate, okay, it looks like it'll work. All right. Okay, so here you have all studies. You see it's selecting all, or you can select recruiting and not yet recruiting studies. But if you want to do a selection, you want to select recruiting and not yet recruiting, and then narrow it down. That's something that you can do. And then you put in your condition here or your disease, right? Condition or disease, and then other terms. But there is a way to do an advanced search, as you see here. I'm sorry, I forgot to say, you also want to select the country, right? And then there's a way to select an advanced search and then click search. So we're going to go to that on the next slide is the advanced search. So for the advanced search, this goes in, and I apologize, this may be a little bit small, but the advanced search, you again put in your condition or disease, any other terms, the study type, and you have the ability to select recruiting. And there are studies that enroll by invitation. You can select it here. And if you want to see something about a past study, you could go active but not recruiting, right? And then if you want to get information on something that has already been completed, you can click completed. Eligibility criteria, so that's important. So each study has eligibility criteria. So who is actually eligible for this study? So if you are an adult and you want to find a study for you and you are within the ages of 18 to 64, you want to check your age off here, right? And then if it's older, then you want to check it off here because you want to make sure that you are eligible for the trial that you're searching for. And then sex, you can put in, some studies are only accruing female participants. So say, for instance, it's a study that is tackling breast cancer and it's a precision medicine trial, and they know that this particular drug would only, they've seen that it's only showing that it's working in women. Now, breast cancer affects men and women because both have breasts. Even though men's breasts are called pecs, they're still breasts. And so you want to select sex just to make sure that the trial is indeed enrolling men if you're a male, and it's a breast cancer study, because it could be a precision medicine that's only enrolling women. So you want to narrow your target here. And then if there's a trial that's accepting healthy volunteers, if you click this area here, that will be included in your search criteria. Now, interventional treatment. So again, we talked about interventional being treatment, supportive care, diagnostic, or prevention. So in terms of cancer, treatment of cancer, supportive care, supporting a side effect, or it could be diagnosing a cancer, or a biomarker that will signify that a cancer is coming, or preventing cancer, or preventing the reoccurrence of cancer. So that you want to select here. Now, you may not know the title of the study, or somebody may tell you, oh, look for X study, you could put that in. The sponsor, somebody may say the study is sponsored by Pfizer, Merck, not being paid by Pfizer or Merck. Those are the ones that came to mind. And then there may be a study ID that you know of and that you can look, because it may be that your referring physician told you about the trial and you can search for it and see if it is indeed in your country, depending on where you are, or your area. And it will tell you where specifically these trials or studies are open. And again, you have the ability to check the phase. If it's early phase, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. So phase 1, early phase 1, meaning that it's first in humans. It hasn't been used in humans yet. It's been tested in the lab. Phase 1 means that it's been used in humans some, and they're testing what is the dose, tolerability, or whether it's efficacious. Phase 2 and phase 3, we've already had the phase 1 portion of the study, and so now we're trying to, okay, what is depending, it may be the maximum tolerated dose, or it may be this dose in these many people, so it's a larger study. And you already know the phase, depending, so you can select that. The funder, whether it's NIH or industry, you may know that and you can select. So these are, if you've already been told about a clinical trial or a research study, and you are now selecting this to narrow that search down. But most often, participants or patients don't know this information, okay? And then results. This is for results. You may have this information or you may not, so you may leave that blank. How are we doing on time? I know it's 12:43 and I want to leave time for questions, but I just wanted to know if I should exit our presentation and go to the live session.
I think we're doing okay on time. It's 12:43. So if you want to continue with that, and then we can move on.
All right. Okay. So we will, I will exit the presentation, and we can just go to Clinicaltrials.gov and we can share, let me see here.
And thank you, Simi, for a valuable presentation. And again, after we share this, the website, we'll go ahead and have the Q&A session. So if you do have any questions, please type them in the chat or the Q&A box. And thank you again for joining.
All right, so clinicaltrials.gov, the website is, you could just type into Google clinicaltrials.gov and it will come up. It will take you to this page here. Is everyone seeing my screen and my mouse moving?
Yes.
I just want to make sure. All right. All right, so it will take you to this screen and you are able to do the advanced search or regular search. And as I said, you can click recruiting and not yet recruiting studies, or just all studies. And again, the other thing I wanted to mention is if you utilize clinicaltrials.gov and you have feedback, you are able to click this link and provide your feedback to help better clinicaltrials.gov, okay? So you can click on advanced search, which is where we were, and you can go ahead and type in a condition or disease, and you could type in the study type. So again, we said interventional or observational or expanded access. And I didn't really touch on expanded access, and so I'll take maybe a minute or two to speak on that. So expanded access studies are actually protocols where they're not open to the wider population just yet. And it could be single patient use. So it could be an emergency use where it needs to happen prior to the approval of the IRB because somebody is dying and it's to save a life. Or it could be a single patient IND, meaning that the treating physician believes that this particular drug that's not yet approved for the indication for the disease that they're going to treat, it's not yet approved for that, but they believe that it can help cure this person, or it may help them get better, but it may not be a cure. And so that is an expanded access. So there's single patient, there is intermediate, and then there's widespread use of an expanded access. So that's something else as well, in addition to a clinical study, okay? And then there is, so I said individual, intermediate, and then the treatment IND protocol, okay? So you're able to select what type of study you want. So we can do interventional studies. And then we could just pick, I'm thinking about breast, and it would be breast cancer, cyst, adenocarcinoma, whatever it is. So let's just pick breast cancer. And we are looking at what's recruiting, what's available to us. We are going to select or age, and we'll do adult. We could select years, we could type in our years, or we could do adult, we don't have to. And then in terms of sex, so studies with female participants and male. So the example I used was a precision medicine trial. And again, precision medicine, it tackles the gene, or it tackles the, somebody else who is a scientific person can better off explain this, but it tackles maybe the gene or the expression, instead of just treating overall, this is the disease, right? So it's more specific. And so again, there may be a precision medicine trial, as I said, in my example, that is for breast cancer, and it's only enrolling female participants. So I am a male and I have breast cancer, and I want to find that one that would be applicable to me. So I'm going to say studies with male participants. And then intervention treatment. This is a targeted search. So if you know, you could put it in, or a title or an acronym or a sponsor. The country is a drop down. So you may be in another country and you want to see if it's offered there, or you may have a family member. You may be here in the US and you may have a family member and you say, oh, I want to see if this is, in the Bahamas or in Aruba or, somewhere else, or in Brazil, Botswana, or if they have to come to the US. So if you're in the US, clearly you're going to select the US, and you want to select your state because you may want to fly someplace, or you may be wanting to treat where you are. So if you are in Florida, you are going to select Florida and Miami, and you can select how far you're willing to go, because you may be willing to go 10 miles or 20 miles, or some people may be willing to drive 30 miles, but depending on the care, you may not want to drive. You can narrow it down. So you say anything within 50 miles, and you may not care what type of study it is in terms of phase. So you may want to just leave that blank, okay? and you go search. And as you could see, this is bringing up all of the studies that are treating breast cancer. That includes for a male who is 18 to 64, and they're currently recruiting. And it tells you what the intervention. So we talked about interventions, and this tells you what the intervention is. So here you see that the intervention, and let me see if I can, because somehow there we go, clear all drawings. For this one, it tells you that this is assessing the benefit of art and music therapy on the quality of life with patients with breast cancer. So this is interventional, but this is looking at, this is supportive care, right? So it's looking at music therapy. So how, we found that music is beneficial, and that's why we play music. If you come to MCI, we have music in our lobby area. Music is beneficial and music is good for the soul. And so this study here is looking at art therapy and music therapy. So this is a behavioral study. And then you have here one that shows you that there is a drug and there are tablets. So you are able to look and you're able to see the locations where these studies are. So this one is in Weston, the Cleveland Clinic. You have Holy Cross here. You have Marin Cancer Care Inc. in California. So this is like telling you all where this is. You have Memorial Health System, Georgetown. So it tells you all of the locations where this particular study is open. And I'm gonna, let me just quickly clear and unclick my annotate so we can scroll. Okay, so here we go. And if you scroll, hold on, let me clear all drawings here so we don't have. So as we see here, I'm just going to use my mouse. We have studies that are open in Sylvester. We have studies that are open in Mount Sinai. So there are studies all across, and we have studies here. This study is open at MCI. And so it tells you all the locations where these studies are open. So I just wanted to give everyone a brief tutorial of clinicaltrials.gov so that you can actively utilize it versus just seeing it on the slide.
Thank you, Simi, for showing us that, and thank you for the valuable information. We are going to open up our Q&A session, so we do encourage you to type your questions in the chat. And we have received quite a few, so I'll go ahead and read them off. A participant would like to know, how do I know if they have received a placebo, and why are placebos used in clinical trials?
Okay, so typically studies that have a placebo, and I'll just answer the first part, why. Studies that have a placebo, you won't know whether you've received a placebo, depending on the study. Sometimes at the end, they'll tell you that you've received a placebo, and sometimes they find throughout the study that the drug that they're testing versus the placebo actually works, and so they better than standard of care, and they're seeing that it's efficacious, and they move the people who are on the placebo arm over. So they unblind and they'll move the people over who are on the placebo to receive the active treatment. So that happens. Now, why do we use a placebo in research? Because we want to see whether there is the active treatment, so the drug or the device, typically it's a drug or a biologic that's being used, is better than nothing at all. And you have to, sometimes there is the placebo effect. So sometimes people think that they're receiving the drug and it will help. So it's good to use the placebo across a number of people, but it typically is in comparison to a drug. So that's why a placebo is used, because they want to compare nothing versus drug.
Thank you, Simi. Do you have another question? And this participant would like to know, at what phase of the trial are patients with the actual condition included in the clinical trial?
Oh, at phase 1. So at phase 1. So in cancer care, there are phase 1 studies, and they're included right then and there. So this means that this doesn't mean that it has not been tested and you're just using it, okay, and get, right away on humans. It means that it has been tested. Sometimes it's first in human, but we do have that in cancer care. So it's right at the beginning at phase 1. That's when humans are included. And I do want to say for those, the question with placebo, because this just came to me, in the event that they're using placebo versus a treatment, if it's cancer, it's not that the person won't get any treatment at all, because that's not ethical. You have to treat the disease. So they're getting some type of standard of care treatment, and then the drug is an add-on, because you can't leave people untreated. You can't be enrolling people in a clinical trial and say, you are going to get placebo and you're going to get this treatment, and we're going to let you progress and see what happens. No, that doesn't happen. That's the role of, that's why the IRB is there. So those types of trials don't get designed.
Thank you, Simi. And we have one last question to conclude the program. This participant would like to know, do we have any ongoing phase 1 studies at MCI currently?
We have a lot of phase 1 studies at MCI currently. And again, Clinicaltrials.gov is a place to search, or you can, and hold on, let me just share, let me see, because I know, or we're working on our website, but let me just go here and I will go to the main Baptist. Okay, so I'm on our intranet. Hold on one second. If you give me Miami Cancer Institute. Give me 1 second here. So Miami Cancer Institute, we're working on our website, and there are areas of, there's an area that has patient resources, and hold on, I'm going to click down. And I'm going to share my screen again. Sorry, share screen. I want to make sure I'm sharing the right one. Okay. So if you go to Miami Cancer Institute, you're able to go to your, you end up in this area here, and you're able to do clinical trials and research. So you can click on clinical trials and research, and you are able to search here to find a clinical trial. So you can view the clinical trials here. And you could find a phase 1. So here we have a phase 1/2. And this is for advanced metastatic solid tumors. This one is a phase 1 of concurrent. Okay, so this is neck, squamous cell, head and neck. So this is for head and neck. And it tells you the investigator and it tells you the phase here. So, and this is a phase 1b/2. So if you go to the MCI website, you just click on clinical trials and then search clinical trials. It'll show you all the clinical trials here at MCI, and you're able to even narrow it down by disease. So again, if you're a male, sorry, I'm just, not that I'm picking on males today. It's just something that came to my mind. So we have studies here with breast cancer or lung cancer for males. And here is a phase 1 study. So you are able to see, and then you can even go further. If you can look at pancreas, all of this. So you have the ability to narrow your search by the disease site.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you, Simi. We truly appreciate you showing us that and how to navigate the website. And thank you again for an informative presentation. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. We will be sending you a short survey. Please take a few minutes to provide us with your valuable feedback so we can continue planning programs that are meaningful to you, just like this one. So have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for taking the time out of your day to attend. We truly appreciate it.